Big money.
Yeah. Well, I got an email that says you now live on your channel. So I feel like we went live. I'm gonna go
Okay.
with the yes.
Okay. All right. I'm going with a yes too.
Yeah.
Let's
Well,
do it.
welcome everyone. Good to see you, and thanks for trying this out with us. Very first time we're trying to live stream. It's very similar to a webinar, but we're going live to LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. And I tried to push everybody to the YouTube. It seemed cooler in my mind that we're live
I
on
know.
YouTube this time. Yeah,
Live
that's
on
it.
YouTube with Jamie. Hey,
Right, yeah, live on YouTube with Jamie and Jack, and
hey.
yeah,
I got my
looking
radio
forward.
voice with you today, Jamie.
You do. Who was that really famous woman radio person that did all like the smooth jazz stuff late at night? Do you know who I'm talking? Do you remember her?
Oh man, I know who you're talking about. It's gonna come to me, but yes,
Yeah,
I think I'm gonna rock a little bit of her today on
yeah.
today. Yeah. I'm gonna
Well,
be
that's
like that
good.
radio DJ with that voice thing I got going on.
Yeah, I like it. And yeah, well, thanks everybody for joining us. So we were supposed to have Dr. David Roney here today, and he is a surgeon, but he actually had surgery on himself this past week.
Wow.
He's okay. We were texting with him earlier, but he was actually saying he was going to do this from laying in his bed, and I was like, "Don't do that." Well, he'll be on here shortly enough, anyways. But so Jack, with her a little bit worn down voice from a little bit of cold, and myself, we're rocking here today. And thanks for
Yeah.
joining this FinServe conversation and kind of webinar, podcast, whatever you might want to call it. And we're going to talk about generational wealth today. And maybe I'll be able to add a couple of David's points in here. I know him pretty well and have heard it, but instead I'm going to kind of interview Jack. And Jack Campbell, a good friend of mine on the FinServe Foundation board, and a lot of you have probably met her before, CEO, founder, and advisor, among a couple other things. But Jack, I'll just turn it over to you real quick in case you want to give anybody the 30 seconds of who you are, what you do, or maybe just start with Alexander Legacy and why that's so important. And then we'll probably get to that legacy and generational wealth piece as we go.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again so much for having me today. Again, bear with me as I power through with my amazing radio voice and a little bit of cold as well. But, to just give you the 30-second overview of Alexander Legacy and a little bit about who we are. I mean, I feel like it's an iteration of a lot of wonderful things, but I would say it really just boils down to us being a platform for amazing advisors and for investors who want to make an impact. And, that's really who we are. We launched because we are, here, we're on a mission, and our mission is to serve and to help more advisors and more investors ensure that they're making an impact with their dollars and with their time and with their treasure.
Yeah. Well, I love that. You were one of the, remember when I did a podcast with you, right as you were, the news had not come out yet that you were joining Carson as a partner. And, I remember the first version of it, you were picking a different name actually for the company.
Yes.
And then you switched over and wrapped your family's name into it.
I
Right?
did. I did. And I'm so glad actually, so it's so funny. It was about like 3 weeks before launch day, and it was like,
Yeah.
ding, 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 you cannot use that name. I'm like, what do you mean? So anyway, long story short, here I am. I'm in Jamaica at the time. I'm like, that was like going to be like my last hurrah before I'm like get ready to launch this firm. And I'm like, wait a minute, you mean to tell me like all the collateral, everything's done, website's built, and we can't use the name? So I'm like, okay. So I'm in Jamaica. I literally go to the water and I'm like, okay, God, what is going to be the name of this company? I mean, it's not a big deal, but kind of a big deal at the same time, And I got like 24 hours to figure this
Yeah.
out. And it was so funny because one of my mentors at the time, her name was Mary, literally called me like an angel Mary out of the blue. And she says, have you ever thought about using your family's name? And I said, you mean Alexander? She was like, yeah, like that's a powerful name. She says, there's a lot of power. And I just had never really, I guess, thought about it like that. But then she started saying Alexander the Great and all these, great. I was like, well, if you say it like that, no. So, it was just a great it was one of those things where, we just had to make a really important decision in 24 hours. And I'm glad that, that we did have that, opportunity to change it to Alexander.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
glad too. I think it's special to have your family's name and all
Yeah.
that legacy part of it. You sent me an awesome video today, and I think we'll go back to a little bit of that. And but tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got kind of got into the profession, because I think that story will lead us into what does generational wealth mean to you? Because I know
Absolutely.
that story. So
You know that story. Exactly. And, and I do want to go back a little bit to Alexander legacy, because I do think there's an important piece of this story that really didn't evolve, if you will, until later on in my chapter of naming the business Alexander. But it was one of those things where at some point there was some objection out there. Jack, you shouldn't name it after your name, because there
Mhm.
might not be people that would want to join it because it's after a name. And I said, well, wait a minute. And so I started to think about all the famous Wall Street firms that are out there. I even started to think about the firm that I'm partnered with.
Yeah.
And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, well, my God, if it's, good enough for them. I
Yeah.
was just wondering, why wasn't it good enough for me? So I tell that story, as a woman, as a person of color. I want to inspire more people. Go out there. A lot of times in history, our names were kind of taken away from us, and we weren't really able to use our names. And so now we have the power to use our names for good and for impact. And so the more I thought about Alexander being part of this legacy and part of this journey, the more I got excited that this was going to be the name, and it was supposed to be the name. And so now I'm honoring the fact that, we're in it, for that reason as well. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there as well,
Yeah,
Jamie.
I love that. I've had that debate. I don't know if you've gotten to meet him much, but Judd Mackerel is a good friend of mine, and
Yes.
we've gone into that one a couple times of should companies be named after you? Should it be bigger than you and something else? But your point, if you go look at a lot of publicly traded companies now, they might have abbreviated them down over time, right?
Yeah.
Like PwC, PricewaterhouseCooper, but these are big companies that started with somebody's name. And then one of the oldest companies in the world. I don't believe it's the oldest. I've looked this up before, but honestly, my memory is not as good as it used to be.
Yeah.
But Nintendo is one of the oldest companies in the world, and that was
Mhm.
named after the founder, right?
That's
Nintendo
right.
is has been a gaming company around for hundreds of years, and is named after the founder too. So it's worked for Nintendo,
Yes.
which is up behind me. I do have a Nintendo back here, so I'm okay.
Hey,
I got Mario, also named after Mario. It's okay. We
I love Super Mario Brothers 1984, baby.
Yeah,
One of my
there you
favorite
go. Yeah,
games.
I got 1, 2, and 3 up there.
There we
So,
go.
Jack, let's go into this. When you hear the term generational wealth, you might think of this differently than, say, maybe what I might think of it. What somebody, I sit in a private wealth management group, and when people think about long-term wealth like that, it might have a different connotation to you. And I know Dr. David was going to talk on this too. But
Yeah.
how has that been different for you, maybe as a Black American versus what some other people might think about when they hear generational wealth?
Yeah, so like for me, I'm very, very fortunate where, I'm actually third generation entrepreneur. So my mother is CPA, she's been one since the day I could remember. And my grandfather owned tons of land in Indiana. He was a farmer, he was a pastor. We had tons of churches. So just growing up, I grew up understanding that, again, because they were entrepreneurs and they were owners, they owned land, they owned businesses. And when they passed, meaning my grandparents, that went directly to my mother. And then she essentially, from that point, she set up a trust. And so, as a Black woman coming up in Detroit, Michigan, I was very, very fortunate that, because of my upbringing, a parent who was exposed, and that keyword exposure keeps coming up in a lot of my conversations lately. I was exposed at a very early age, to a family that, believed that had access to ownership. And it wasn't because my grandfather was rich. It was because he worked very, very hard. He tended his farm and he knew how to go go out and negotiate deals. He was a businessman. So as soon as he made money, he knew how to take that money and he knew how to turn it into more money. He was very, very, very intelligent and crafty. He knew how to, take $1 and turn it into 5 or 6, by turning his, his farmland into, additional streams of income. So again, I like to say, I get it honestly. Now that's my journey, which is very different than maybe the journey of some of my colleagues that may have had a very different upbringing than what I had. So for me, generational wealth is that. It's carrying my grandfather's legacy. It's carrying that moment that I remember when I was 6 years old, hanging out with him in his churches and on the farms and making sure that he knew when I'm gone, this is going to be yours. And, you're going to keep this. And to this day, that farm is still in our family. It's still in a family trust. And I still see my grandfather's face, and his spirit, and for me, my goal is I'm going to be that one day. I'm going to be that grandmother. I'm not yet, but I will be that grandmother that will pass those same type of hopefully lessons on and legacy on as well.
Yeah, and I've got 2 questions I want to get to out of that, but you also have the other experience from that too early on in your career, right? So tell me about the opposite of that experience of seeing that family wealth being passed onward.
Yeah, then there was the other experience, as you know, Jamie, where one of my first jobs was working as an intern in a private bank. And one of the days I remember a client came in and I'm looking at their portfolio and they actually have the same address as my grandmother. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, this is a little weird. This is my grandmother's address, but it's not her name. So I went to one of my trust officers and I said, can you help me understand what happened here? And so what they explained was when my grandmother passed away, her property was sold to another family. Mm-hmm. And that other family purchased that property and placed it in their trust. And so in my mind, again, I'm 16 years old at the time. I'm like, what does all that mean? And basically, in short, what it means is it's no longer part of your family. It's part of someone else's. And I was like, okay. And that was just my wake up call. Like, how could we have kept that in our family? Was it for a lack of education? Was it for the fact, so that really started the journey of me really wanting to understand more about, again, generational wealth. And most importantly, it really started exploring this whole concept of what is a trust account? At 16, I'm trying to understand, how do I get one of those and get my family legacy back?
Yeah. And it's, that's such an important concept because people who pay attention to the trust world have learned how to pass wealth down for multiple generations for a long time, right? As you know, I work over at Bryn Mawr Trust now, and there's trusts in there that are hundreds of years old that are passing on wealth. I mean, it's the overall company, Wisfis, is almost a 200-year-old company, right? That started in Wilmington and has been doing trust and banking since then.
Right.
What type of advice do you provide, I'd say younger people listening and also some of the clients that you interact with? I did an event with you where you had a number of kind of women business owners and entrepreneurs here in Philadelphia. And I thought what was interesting about that is almost everybody in the room had a shared experience about real estate, about lost family wealth in that community, right? Like it was just different and it is pervasive. And I'll go back to a regular question here because I'm adding a lot of different things. And then I saw a tweet today too, which I think might have been Anna Incahante, might have been somebody else. I wasn't on there for long, but just talking about how the Black community in the U.S. is hyper focused on owning real estate and LLCs and things like that. But what I thought was interesting was that dinner we had in that meeting where almost everybody went around and shared their story. And a lot of people had a loss of, wealth at some point in their family. So
absolutely.
What type of advice do you kind of, when you hear that, all of that ramblings of me, what comes out of that for you?
Absolutely. I think what comes out of that for me, Jamie, you hit the nail on the head. I think there is that in our culture, a lot of it is the opportunity to be able to, one, get wealth. That's a big deal, especially in the Black community. I mean, to be able to have access to, whether it's land or real estate, to begin with. That's huge, because I mean, just not even 60, 70 years ago, that may have not been a huge reality for much of America. Now, fast forward, I mean, I'm very, very blessed to be, kind of born at such a time as this, to where, I'm old enough, but yet still young enough to remember how it was even back in the 80s, when my parents were trying to buy a home, when interest rates were, where they were, and how many people could really afford that even back then, right? Then you take it 20, 30 years prior. So, the stories that you heard were stories, that came from like our parents and our parents' parents that fought really hard to buy homes, and to do it during Jim Crow era, and do it, during eras where there were things like redlining, and, where, if you were in certain neighborhoods, you weren't able to purchase properties in neighborhoods where property values were going, through the roof, right? And so you can only imagine, a lot of wealth was created for a lot of Americans through their homes, and Black Americans wanted to be able to participate in that same American dream, right? And so that's what you were listening to. And it was like, now it's like, how do we capture that now that redlining is illegal? And right now that it's like, okay, I can buy in the nice neighborhoods too, but can I afford the taxes? Can I be able to keep up the taxes if grandmother passes away and we inherit the home, even though, the home may be paid for? Is the family positioned properly to still maintain that? So, you and I have been on many panels where we talk about these kind of stories, and that's really what you hear about, is the affordability of being able to maintain what may not even be, affordable today, as we know, with interest rates and with where things are even in 2023. So it was just those stories of, I think, if I'm hearing you correctly, just some of the trauma, that came from it. But then now some of the things that, we're doing to help you. You mentioned, what advice, are we giving people like that? And it's like, we can either have a community of, what I like to say, I don't like to really support communities of trauma per se. I want to understand the trauma so that we can then support communities of solutions, which is, how do we take the lessons that we learned from the traumas of our past and from maybe our ancestors, and now as we are starting to maybe build generational wealth, in some cases for the very first time, in some cases we're on the second or third generation, but now it's like, really understanding that, there's things like what we talk about all the time: getting trusted financial advice, having a financial plan, connecting with the right, investment teams, so that, we're taking things like estate planning very seriously. We're doing things like having that trust. There was a reason why I saw that trust at 16. So now I can make sure that my family and my children's children, we can ensure that we're sustaining our wealth through having those kind of vehicles. So it really has opened up a door, long story short, for investment education. Our people perish for lack of knowledge, right? And so the more we're able to get education out there where they can understand it. And Jamie, that's the thing that you do that's so well. Like, you keep it simple, because a lot of us, especially Black Americans, a lot of us are just really learning this for the very first time. Investing is still a very new thing. It's, not been in our family history for generations, right? And so we're coming in and we're trying to, we hear all these fancy buzzwords, and it might scare some people away. So my job is, simply put, is to keep it simple and make the complex. We like to say, keep it simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we have young people on here that are just looking at the start of their careers. And when you look out at that, I mean, you went into the corporate world and had a very successful career there, and then eventually had that, kind of desire to go out and build your own company, right?
Yes.
But what's some of the advice you have going back to start a career? You have people on here, before you get to generational wealth, I mean, you got to get started. So what's some of the advice you have for people getting started? But as they look towards, there are probably people listening to this that say, I absolutely want generational wealth. I want my kids to have it, and my grandkids, or at least the opportunities to, build that wealth.
Absolutely. Well, for me, my journey again was just really it was about taking advantage of those internship opportunities and being able to know that I knew I wanted to be in business. I still maybe didn't really quite know it was going to be financial services, but I knew business was something. So again, I think knowing that and having some passion and excitement about that is key. I would say that's first and foremost. I hope I'm answering the question the right way as far as like, for our young people. I mean, that's first and foremost. But if you have the opportunity while you're still young, before there's a lot of obligations behind you, find that true north as best as you can. That thing that just makes you super, super excited and pops you out of bed every day. And one of the things I learned very early on, my mother was a CPA, and so she sat behind spreadsheets all day. And so, of course, naturally, I was going to be a CPA and take over her practice. And I started sitting behind spreadsheets every day. And I was like clamming up. I was miserable. It was not me. As you guys can tell, I'm energy. I needed to be in front of people. I did not want to be in front of spreadsheets. So I immediately shifted. And I went to like my mentors at the time and I said, where can I thrive? Put me where I'm going to be my very best self. I love numbers. I love making money. I love the markets. I love investing. I love the science behind it. But I'm the girl that wants to be maybe on stage or out meeting and mixing with people, not behind the spreadsheets. I'm going to die. And so I think, more of the story is really understand your true north. This industry is big, it's vast. There's a lot of different parts of this industry, from being an analyst all the way to being on, a financial advisor. And so, for me, it was just really about finding that true north. And here we are. So I don't know if I answered the question, but I just wanted to, I think if you're young enough, you have that, that time and that energy to explore different areas, but be true to yourself.
Yeah. No, I like that advice. And it's also your skill set is energy and interaction, and you steered into that, not away from it. You mentioned coming from a family of entrepreneurs, and I feel remiss if I didn't bring this up because I think it's such an amazing moment. But you got to be on stage with your mom co-presenting back at FPA National this year, which I feel like is a really amazing thing when you talk about like legacy and generational wealth. I mean, the ability for, mom and daughter to both be on a stage. And I know Kellen was on earlier. I know she was checking it out, and Farr and Steve Resch all kind of helped contributed to that. But tell me a little bit about that experience, because when I think of generational wealth, it's also about opportunities and values in my mind. And I imagine you got to experience a little bit of that being on stage with your mom.
I mean, I could get emotional thinking about that day because, so for all my career, and this is my 30th year in financial services. I started my internship in 1993 and it never stopped. So here I am in 2023. And it was amazing because my entire career, I never had the opportunity to share a stage with my mom, who was, again, the original mentor. She was my original boss, if you will. And so back in September at the FPA conference, on my late father, so my bonus father, who she was married to since I was 2 years old, so pretty much my father who raised me, he passed away in 2009. However, his birthday was September 28th. And so her and I got to share the stage on what would have been his 75th birthday if he were still alive. And so that moment obviously was just serendipitous, as we got a chance to share that moment on his birthday. And so I always like to take a step back, even before and after, and reflect and really think about what that moment meant for me, and what it meant for that, for this topic today. And it truly meant, like, I think about him, and he was the very first person who sowed a seed into me. I remember when he was living, and I remember back at that time, he was one of my very first clients when I was advising. He was like that guy who always believed in me. He always just said, no matter what, there's something special about you. And so what I would say to like my young people is, there's like that person in your life, whether it's your mother, your father, your mentor, your neighbor, your uncle, I don't know, your godparent, that person who just pours into you and believes in you and reminds you that, this this mission is all about you, like that was him.
Mhm.
And so to have that moment on stage with my mother that day, and Jamie with you, like I think you were third row, if
Mhm.
I'm not mistaken, it was just like, it was like Christmas Day for me, guys. But
Yeah.
that's the definition of generational wealth. It wasn't a Rolex on my watch, on my wrist, right? It wasn't a
Yeah.
Maserati in the parking lot. It wasn't, the material Gucci bag. It wasn't that. It was being on stage with my mother on my father's birthday, with Jamie right there, with the crowd, and me being able to have that moment was priceless.
Yeah.
And that's why I do what I do. And I want to help so many more people have those kind of moments like you
No,
helped me.
I love that. It was wonderful, and we had a great dinner that night too, which was
We
fun.
did.
Yeah.
Jamie, I got to say this. I have a book. It's called Taxes and Tacos by Jamie Hopkins. Okay. We can talk
Yeah.
about that later.
Yeah, more tacos than taxes, right?
More
That's what you want.
tacos than taxes.
Yeah. But sometimes when people hear this term generational wealth, I actually think some people almost have a negative connotation or reaction to it. So, how would you address that, right? Because there are people that look at that and be like, "Well, why should anybody have generational wealth?" Right? What's your feeling on that topic?
So I try to understand when I hear the negative connotation,
Hmm.
really what people are referring to. I mean, I know some people feel like they just want to die broke. I know there's that mentality of like, listen, I'm going to just spend all my money while I'm here and, bury me
Yeah.
with all my riches, right? And I mean, that's that's a person who probably needs to sit down and really explore some deeper healing, right? In my opinion, I think there's a deeper scenario there, especially if you have a family. I believe that when you are a family person, essentially, or if you're someone who maybe you don't have children, but you have a community that you care about. Whether it's young people who are exploring careers in financial services to all the things that we know are so important that people are giving back to. We see what's happening across this globe. I mean, our help is needed in
Yeah.
every way possible. So to me, generational wealth is about, I like to use the term, my KPI is my LPI. So KPI, my friends, my key performance indicator is how many legacies, how much philanthropy, and what kind of impact am I making on this world. And that's really my indicator for generational wealth. So when people have that negative, I kind of re-explore, are you just looking at it again, going back, is it just a material thing?
Hmm.
Because if we're just tying it to like wealth, the way Instagram likes to label it, and the way the world likes to label it, then yeah, I mean, I'm not interested in that either. But when we're trying to really go deeper as far as wealth being your legacy, the ability to use your true gift and talent that you were built and created to be here for, and use it to just help the world become a much better place. And that might be through things like FinServe and other type of communities where we're helping young people not only get access to great careers in financial services, but what is that going to do? It's going to help more people like our families ensure that we have the ability to have trusted advice. And so all of that, I know it's a lot
Yeah.
that I just kind of explore, but that's generational wealth. And I guess to explore the next, I would love to maybe get someone to challenge me on it.
Yeah.
That could be a fun debate.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, I probably would have challenged earlier on in my life. I would say, which I've changed a little bit on my views. I do think for me, having kids changed my perspective on what I view as generational wealth, because all of a sudden you have this, like, I have much more of a desire to leave something, including wealth financially, to my kids than I did before I had kids, right? Like,
Sure.
then that's probably fairly natural. Did your son change your view on that too?
Oh, absolutely. Definitely, when you have kids, it reminds you when you were a kid, I think,
Yeah.
and I'm like, all right. And so it just really does put things into a whole different perspective where you just, you just don't want to hand them everything and spoil and rotten. But at the same time, you don't want them to start from zero. And you do want to have a groundwork that is my hope and prayers that my kids are so much better than me, that they take all the lessons that I, did good, bad, and they're different. And they just kick my ass even better than I was able to do. And so that's my goal, is, with generational wealth being the actual, not just like you say, the money that we pass along, which is critically important if we're going to be living in the United States of America. I'm just saying, we just can't put that aside like we can live like we're in a third world country. We can't. We need to properly plan if we're going to be successful here in America and have wealth. And so I want our young people to take it seriously. I don't want them waiting until they're 40 or plus to start saving when they have the ability to start saving in their 20s. That's when I started saving, which is why I was able to successfully walk away from my corporate role and start a business in my early 40s. So I just wanted to put that plug out there too, because a lot of young people ask me, when should I start saving? And I'm like, now, today. Part of generational wealth is that. And then it's all the other, the non, material things as well.
Well, I'm going to close this off with, I've done this a couple times, and when I feel up to it, I really enjoy it. And I kind of call it more of a lightning round. So I'm going to throw maybe between 5 and 7 questions at you. And I really just want quick answers, which I know for you, you're going to want to tell me a story. But
okay, no stories. I know. Okay.
And if anyone else has, I see a couple of people actually wrote in a comment or two. If you have one and you want me to ask, feel free to do it if you catch this lightning round. So the first one is, Jack, what's a book you've read in recent years that comes to mind that you would recommend others to read?
Find Your Freedom. It's like right on my desk. I'm just going to say it. It is. Yeah. Find Your Freedom.
Well, you are featured in that one, so that's a good one. Yes. What is your favorite food? That's one I've asked you before, but I love this. That's one of my favorite things is food.
Cliche fried chicken, y'all. Sorry. I love some good fried crispy chicken. Yeah. I am a connoisseur.
If you could have any job in the world today, Jack, and money didn't matter, right? You had all the money in the world. What job would you pick?
Oh, do I have to pick a job? If I have all the money in the world, if I had all the money in the world, I would be selling coconut water in Jamaica.
Okay. So coconut water in Jamaica. That sounds like a good one. What is the best piece of advice you received growing up?
Save. Save. I mean, it's literally saved my life. Saving.
All right. And so the last one is, what's something over the next year you're most looking forward to? And it could be anything.
Over the next year, I'm going to my 30th high school reunion next year. So, it's always fun when you've been gone for 30 years and you show up and you're like, oh, I'm about to show up and I better show out. So guys, I'm working it out. I'm getting myself together because, Jack got to show up right for the 30th.
Okay. So I want to know, are you close to a lot of people still? What excites you about that? See, that sounds like the worst. And I actually like high school, but I have no desire to go back to a 30th anniversary. No, nothing. And we got a good one here too, but answer that. Well, why are you so excited about the 30th anniversary high school reunion, Jack?
Yeah, so I'm very close with the little city I grew up in. It was a suburb of Detroit called Southfield, and honestly, we actually called ourselves the original Black Wall Street. There's a story behind that. There's a whole nother podcast we should do about that, to be honest with you, because there was a lot of very successful Black Americans that had launched businesses as entrepreneurs. My mother being one of them in Southfield. So Southfield back in the 70s and 80s for Black Americans was a mecca. I mean, you could get a home, they had pools in the backyard, jacuzzis, horses, tennis courts. Yes, Black Americans. So it's a little known secret there that, Southfield, Michigan Michigan was a very upscale Beverly Hillish type neighborhood. And so we grew up together, and our classmates just were very, very close. And, we all many of us went on to become executives at major firms. And, I'm very proud to say, went on to just do amazing things. And so here we are now 30 years later, and it's excited to actually come back to, really just share our stories of like success. And we've also, of course, there's other stories as well, but I'm a proud Blue Jay. That's what we Southfield Blue Jay, 1994.
There we go. Abby wrote in a question here, and I'll read this one, and then if we don't get any more, we'll wrap up. But what are your thoughts on retirees passing inheritance while they are alive? It's a great question. Yes. I'm happy to chime in after you too, but
I know you got the retiree special, right? That's you, Jamie. I guess, for me, if you can afford to, I'm assuming we're in a situation where you can afford to start gifting things while you're still living. And so if we're in a situation where that makes, financial sense, then I would say do it. But again, I wouldn't want to impact my retirement by moving things away. And then now I have to be in a situation where I've got to borrow, money because I was so charitably inclined out the gate. So I don't know. Those are my initial thoughts. Jamie, I'll hand it to you as the specialist.
Yeah, but look, that's where I land too is, look, nobody else is going to save or pay your retirement for you. So you have to do that first. Now, if you can afford that and you want to give to your kids or grandkids while alive, there are some tax benefits of doing that, actually, that there are some interlife or inter vivos, and the legal side of me comes out, while alive gifts that are actually more efficient than waiting upon death. So there are tax benefits and other reasons to give, especially if you have, say, like income producing property and you've got kids or grandkids in lower income brackets. So you can also like shift income downward, and that can be an effective gifting strategy. The other part though is, look, it's not me, but like grandparents love giving stuff to their grandkids. They might love that more than eating. So the reality is, right, that to some degree, do you love it? Do you like that impact? Are you a giver? And if you are, you might want to see that money enjoyed by your family rather than like hope they enjoy it after you pass away. Right. And again, there are other ways to do this where you can give some stuff, but still maintain like the core principle inside of a trust until you die. So there are strategies to kind of accomplish that. But I talk about it in Find Your Freedom. Like, my mom's a giver. I would never want to take that. That's her favorite thing, is to give gifts to the grandkids. And, she brought gifts here this last weekend. And that's what gives her the most amount of happiness. So if she's an extra $1,000 short in retirement at some point, she'd probably gladly trade that off to give gifts to her grandkids. And that's a little bit of that trade-off. But I would go back to, I don't think you should give so much that you can't meet your needs and somebody has to come in and take care of you. But there are some benefits to doing it while you're alive. So
that's right. And I just want to bring that up because a lot of our grandparents, they will give and they don't have it to give. And then we're like, okay. So thank you, Jamie.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody at FinServe. Thanks, everybody that hopped on here today. Jack, thank you so much for bringing your energy and you drinking your hero drink to get through it. Yeah.
I know. This is such a delicious drink for anybody who needs a hero. This is good.
Yeah. And we all wish Dr. Roney a speedy recovery. I know he's out there tweeting, so he is alive. We just we need him to feel a little bit better.
Feel better. We are wishing you well, my friend.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and healthy. Look forward to seeing you all again soon.